Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Steve Lindsley, Executive Pastor of Providence Presbytery, and grateful to be back for our second Ministry Toolbox. Last month, we heard from Jerry Cannon about shared ministry. It was wonderful. A little bit about Ministry Toolbox. If this is the first time you were tuning in, this is a monthly webinar that I'm leading with various folks bringing all kinds of best practices, good ideas for ministry practitioners, experts, or just people that have really good questions and really good thoughts about things. So the hope in this is that there will be resources that churches in our presbytery can make good use of. We have some amazing things signed up for the rest of the year. If you have a particular topic that you think would be useful for our churches, I would love to hear about it. And bonus points if you have a person or two that you can recommend to lead it. You can learn all about Ministry Toolbox, watch previous episodes, and see what's coming up just by going to providencepress.org and searching for Ministry Toolbox. I was prepared to welcome Erica Allen from Horizon Stewardship as our speaker tonight. Erica had a scheduling conflict, so instead we have Rhodes Logan, also from Horizon Stewardship. And this is probably a good time just to sort of do a full disclosure that, as many of you all know, in addition to my halftime work as your executive presbyter, I am also a senior ministry strategist with Horizon Stewardship. I thought it would be good to bring someone else in so that you didn't have to listen to me yap my trap like you already are having to do. But also because Rhodes Logan in particular, who is here with us tonight, has a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom that he can offer up. And it's just an all-around genuine great guy. So I'm going to welcome Rhodes. And Rhodes, would just love for you to just share a little bit about yourself before we get started, please.
Sounds great. Well, this is a real honor for me to be with you tonight. I'm Rhodes Logan. I've been with Horizon Stewardship for almost 8 years now, but this is my 30th year in fundraising. Started my career with United Way. With my undergrad is from a small Baptist college, Carson Newman. Worked with the University of Tennessee for a decade, and then was able to move and work with the United Methodist Church. One of the things I want to express to you, though, is that my mother is a pensioner from the Presbyterian Church. I was married in Presbyterian Church. My kids grew up in a Presbyterian church. Served as a deacon and a finance committee chair, and so that falls under the no good deed goes unpunished as a member of a local church. But it had just a great experience in the Presbyterian Church. As we moved to Nashville and worked with the Methodist Church, had to change sides, but I still keep a lot of very close friends in the Presbyterian Church system. As Horizons, we serve lots of different denominations. I've served with Presbyterian, United Methodist churches, Lutheran churches, Episcopal. So, I run the gamut. A lot of the work that I also do is with religiously related nonprofits. So that kind of gives you a flavor for some of the things that I do and I am about. Again, live in the Nashville area. I'm actually in South Carolina this week. My daughter is a fifth grade teacher in Beaufort County. So I am down visiting her, and she's just had a great experience. Second year teaching, and we knew when she left Tennessee, we were never going to get her back from South Carolina. It's how it works. It's a beautiful area and beautiful state. So, again, just a pleasure to be with you.
Well, thank you much, Rhodes. We appreciate that. So I'll let you start up. I know you've got a presentation for us as we normally do, folks. There will be a little bit of time at the end for any questions that you might have for Rhodes. And then we try to finish right at an hour, if not a little on the early side of that. There apparently is some big sporting event that is going on that I'm sure many of us want to eventually get to our televisions and tune into. So, Rhodes, with that, the floor is yours. Thank you again for being with us.
Well, thank you. And I especially appreciate each of you being a part of this. Steve and I may or may not be a part of the pool with ESPN's pool. So, just throwing it out there. So we'll be able to look at that later. And I will tell you, my daughter has beaten me every single year in this, and she picks the teams by their mascots and their colors. So it shows how much, me doing research and all that stuff does absolutely no good. Well, let's get into our subject tonight. Um, can everybody see that? Changes in church giving? Thumbs up. Good, good. Okay. In my time, in my 8 years with Horizon Stewardship, we again, and I'm sure Steve has mentioned some about, but we've been around over 30 years. We have raised over $10 billion for different religiously related nonprofits and especially for local churches. But one of the things that we all bring as a group to this, Steve and I share information with each other. We're in a small group together that helps each other continue to grow and help us. But we are all really working in ministry. So a lot of the information that you will see tonight, I shamelessly stole from other people. So don't think this is all original ideas to Rhodes Logan. But these are all things that I think have been very helpful to me in my ministry and serving with churches. So let's start off by talking about a focus and changes in church giving. We've all seen these changes, and let's kind of dive into some of the information. Let's see, there we go. Now, here's kind of the headline. We do not have a giving problem as the United States, as local churches, as people to attend churches. We have a church giving problem. And so let's dive into that just a little bit. And I want to show you some statistics. So one thing you'll have to bear with me. I'm a data nerd. I love the data. I love that starting off with this to help kind of set a frame. So as we talk about overall what giving looks like in the United States and what philanthropy looks like, we have continued to grow from 1984 to 2024. You see the curve line there. Giving has continued to increase every single year in that process with a few ups and downs. As we think about where most gifts come from, it is still, at the first of my career 30 years ago, individuals made up roughly 75%. It's now about 66% because some of that is foundations have become a much larger portion now of where giving is coming from, but that's mostly individuals just finding ways to use their wealth in other ways. As you look at trends in giving, this is something that surprised me when our managing partner pointed this out. There is kind of this urban legend or myth that over time, people are just less philanthropic, people are giving less. One of the things that's interesting is from 1984 till now, even if you go back almost all the way to the end of World War II, what you see is a trend that people are still giving roughly the same amount of their disposable income that they did almost going back to World War II. So this data is from 84 to 24, but what it shows is we're still pretty close to, took this on an average, we're still keeping about that 2%. Is staying consistent through this process. So again, the money is there. People are still giving. Now, what has changed is what they're giving to and what they're being asked to give to. Let's get into some of that. So here are some of the organizations, the types of organizations now that are receiving gifts. As you see here, religion is 23% of this. When I started my career, this was almost 50%. Almost 50% of this wheel back in 1995 to 96 was in religion as far as where most gifts went. Now, one of the things that is separating even within religious giving is giving to religious organizations versus giving to local churches. They're thrown in together here in this stat, but they are different and they're kind of going in different directions in some ways as well. So here is one of the factors as we talk about giving to local churches. I have worked for five different organizations, through my career. But one of the things you see is we have a steady increase of 501c3 organizations. So going back to 2013, even just going back to 2013, there was just roughly a million. We are now heading into a time period after 20, this data goes through 2023. My understanding is we're coming up on 2 million organization 501c3 organizations out there, most of them asking for charitable gifts. Some of them do great work. Some of them are religious organizations also. But again, if you think about this as who is asking, there's just a lot more people out there asking these days. than there has been in the past. So let's look at some of the trends now too of where how people are giving and where uh, in parts of different society by income where some people are struggling, some people have done very well. This is not a political statement by any means. It's a statement of reality and economics, which is the top 1% continues to grow in their ability to give, but they also have continued to grow pretty massively in their investment. Now, conversely, you see that, the upper 40%, the rest of the upper 40% of all gifts there have remained the same. So you look at this, below the top 1%, you have the 19% and the 20%, so roughly 39% there have stayed relatively the same, from 1990 to 2020, and it's pretty much on a flat plane now. So you see the top 1% making up for a lot of gifts that are being lost here down at the bottom. And I don't think this is just speculation. We're seeing a lot of research that says people in this lower half are struggling. Families are struggling to give. They're struggling to give to their local church, to just about anything else. And so I'm seeing this over and over again as I am serving religiously related nonprofits. You see this kind of a gap that continues to change where many families are struggling. Those that have the ability are still giving, and they're still giving at a larger amount. Now I think there is a in the philanthropy circles, people who work in universities and lots of others, that they talk about a time period when we might have reached this mountain peak where the folks at the very top might not be able to make up for the losses at the bottom. We're not quite there yet. We're still kind of at the top of that ridge, meaning that the top 1% has been able to make up for the losses here. But that's not going to be a trend that will stay in that forever. So now, starting to relate this back to local churches, thinking about what other kinds of data and what else we need to prepare ourselves to be better at asking and preparing ourselves to make sure we're making the best case we can. Um, Here are some trends that I want before we go into the church data. I want to show you just some overall trends that I think in this that sums up some of these pieces. And this is kind of the Debbie Downer portion of the program where I'm telling you how bad things are in some ways. But I want to tell you, stick with me because there's a lot of good information that will be very uplifting in ways that we can help our churches be successful. So let's talk about some of those. Some of these things that are trends. Americans give about the same as they did 40 years ago. 99% of giving still, is up and down in economics. So, there are still some up and downs when it comes to where the economy is. Um, Giving to churches is down 60% in the last 40 years. I think this is one of those headlines. If you take few things away from this presentation, I hope this is one of those. Because, again, looking at the number of 501c3s that are out there asking, looking at where we are today, um, you know, we've got to up our game in some ways and how we are asking, what we're focusing people's attention on, and what we are how we are approaching them to keep them in this community of faith that they feel very, very connected to. And again, families are struggling. One of the pieces that I will have in this presentation that I want to give you kind of a forward cue on is that there are some generational patterns and differences in giving that I think will be important for us to talk about as well. One of the biggest pieces I think that I have found as I have worked with local churches and with religious related nonprofits, you have to have a missional focus for people to understand who you are and why they should give to you. And this is one of the things that many 501c3s do very, very well. They have a missional focus, and they say, here is our mission statement, here's our vision statement. We are aligning our organization in a way that helps us achieve things that we want to in the future. So when we talk about missional priorities and what those ought to be in a church level, I want to read, if you'll forgive me, this is a Baptist pastor. But I think he's made a very good quote here in something that I think can be very helpful to set a frame for what we're talking about when we're talking about missional priorities. And I'll read this. Churches must create a model of ministry that encompasses all the important components into a concentric focus. Missional focus is the DNA of the church. It should be who we are, not just one of the things we do. The discipleship, evangelism, outreach, ministry, worship, and every other program must be birthed out of and in perfect sync with the missional statement of the church. State your missional purpose often, make it conspicuous around the facilities, preach annually on it, allow it to give birth to your ministries. Your focus will become your function. And so, one thing I do want to highlight there, your focus will become your function. And in the absence of a focus, it is very hard to move the needle in that process. So let's continue on here. So let me give you a couple of examples of missional priority statements and how some churches have used these to focus on the things that they want to be in the future. This is probably a church you've heard of, Peachtree Presbyterian in Atlanta, big steeple church, lots of members. What they did was they wanted to focus on some missional priorities that help them look internally to say, we've got to do some work with our own people internally before we do a lot of work externally as well. So they picked three missional priorities. The first is behold in worship. And what they're talking about is having excellent worshiping system there, which also includes small groups and Sunday school classes, not just the true worship experience. Belonging to a community, how we continue to talk about how we are, how we are a community of faith together, how we perceive that a church can be a community of faith together, and then becoming more like Jesus, creating an intentional discipleship path internally for their people to make sure as they are building and growing, they can be strong internally, so then they can reach outward. But this all is information that's on their website and has been helpful in trying to show a frame of what a church is trying to do to set the goals that they want to try to achieve. I'll give you another example here. This is Madison Street United Methodist Church in Clarksville, just up the road from Nashville. Their priorities were a little bit different. Their focuses were on children and youth, urban ministries, which was a homeless shelter actually built out of their church. There was no, and still to this day in Clarksville, Tennessee, there is no homeless shelter or food pantry. Those services didn't exist. So this urban church in downtown Clarksville took the opportunity to take one of their older buildings and recreate it into an urban ministry center. So they've focused on children and youth, urban ministries, and a ministry of music. Being close to the Nashville community, they've got a lot of great artists that live in a pretty wide area. But they also have a focus on youth choirs. And so blending that children and youth and the youth choirs together has been a focus for them because they feel like that's where they're really going to get a lot of attention and a lot of focus. But also one of the things that both of these churches did, they set a 5-year plan for ministry. And that 5-year plan for ministry really is essential to help them start talking about how do we start to reach some of these goals. Yeah, we set some goals for ourselves and things that we really want to be in a vision. How do we actually achieve these things? So they, so setting 2 or 3 missional priorities, publicizing those things will be very, very important, making sure that people know it, they see it on a regular basis. Creating that 5-year plan that everybody knows about. Staffing the church to obtain your missional priorities. Now, this is where things can get tough. This can become a challenge inside a church because you, as a community of faith, you've got to have a lot of consensus. This is the direction we're all going in the same place because you're going to start thinking about your building. You're going to start thinking about your budget. And you're going to start thinking about your staffing and how that relates to what you are trying to achieve as a church. All of those things are important, but again, this is one of those foundational kind of things that I think has been really helpful to a lot of churches in helping them move the needle in giving is again starting at this 1,000 foot level to talk about what are those missional priorities you want and you feel like will be most helpful to you moving forward. Now, coming out of those missional priorities, you need to put together, and again, every church absolutely should have a valid mission and vision statement that everybody that is known, people understand, and is communicated through the church, so people understand who you are as a church. So again, your mission statement is a declaration of your purpose, defining what you do, who you serve, and why you exist. So again, this is who we are. We want this mission statement to be the best version of ourselves. This is who we aspire to be today. Now, our vision is going to be who we want to become in the future. This is an inspirational declaration of the long-term goals and desired future that you have for yourself. Again, setting that 5-year plan for ministry includes setting that vision statement that will help you look toward a future that you want to attain. So let's look at a couple of examples of these as well. Okay. So again, this is First Presbyterian Church in Dixon, Tennessee, which is in the Nashville area. This is their mission statement. We are a church where questions are welcome, diversity is embraced, and Christ's love moves us to action. We gather to worship, grow in grace, and share the good news. Our doors are open to all seeking hope, healing, and spiritual home. Their vision statement is we love God, follow Christ, and serve others. So you see that these don't have to be complex. In fact, your mission statement should never be over 3 sentences. It needs to be something succinct enough that you can inspire people with it. People can grasp it, and they can say, "Okay, yeah, I get that." Your vision statement again needs to be even shorter. It should ideally be 1 sentence. That 1 sentence should encompass who you want to be and who you aspire to be in the future. So a couple of examples here of those. Fountain City United Methodist Church. This is where my kids spent some time in Knoxville just before we moved to the Nashville area. At Fountain City UMC, we make disciples and change lives through youth and children's ministries, an intentional discipleship path, and aligned missional priorities. Their vision statement is Fountain City aspires to transform lives through making disciples and changing lives in our community and around the world. So again, just want to give you some of those, the flavor of what those actually look like. Now, giving by generations, this is something that I think is a very important information for us to continue to keep in mind because not all generations see the church the same, and not all generations approach the church in the same way. So let's dig into this. Looking at the support. So you have boomers, Generation X, millennials, and then Gen Z. Those are the 4 primary ones. And if you think about it in this way, your boomers are going to be 80s and 70s age range. Your Generation Xers, your 50s and 40s. Your millennials are going to be your 40s and 30s, and your Generation Zs are going to be your 30s and 20s, age range wise. So let's take a look at how some of their giving it has changed here in some ways as well. For places of worship, boomers actually, it has been fairly steady there, up maybe just about 15%. Places of worship for Gen X has actually gone up about 34%. As we look at the other 2 generations, and again, I'm flying through a lot of information. I want to throw enough at you to have you get a sense of some of these things. But again, we want to be able to share some of this as well, so you can absorb it later on as well. Millennials, this is one of the keys, and I think this is important. These are people in their 40s and 30s. You can see that they've had a 57% increase in their giving to places of worship. I think that's significant. And again, as we think about these families coming back with young kids to churches, sometimes they've been away, they went to college, they had different things going on in their lives. As they're re-engaging with churches or engaging further with churches, that experience is going to be important. And again, your Gen Zs, these are people just starting, 20s and 30s. But again, their giving to places of worship has continued to drop in some ways. And again, some of that is how we as churches are trying to connect with them, and finding ways, imaginative ways to do that, obviously will be very helpful. Okay, so let's move on here. So how do they connect to the church? Data that I have seen and my anecdotal evidence that I have observed through the churches that I have worked with, here's it paints kind of a picture of where things are. Boomers, their primary connection to the church is that worship experience. Their second is a Sunday school class. Their third would be a mission and service. When I say service, I mean like serving on a committee, serving on a finance committee, other things like that, being a deacon elder, things like that. So now with Generation X, it's actually some of these have changed. So you see, these are the people in their 50s and 40s. Generation X, it's Sunday school class is that number one connection for them. Missions and service is the second, and then worship experience is actually third. Same thing like with millennials. Missions now is first for them. And again, these are the 40s and 30s. Missions is first. Their Sunday school class and small group is second, and their worship experience is third. Um, and again, Gen Z, missions and small group and their worship experience is actually pretty farther down as far as their connections to the church. So as we look and see how we are trying to connect to different age ranges, we have to have multiple ways that we connect, but and to make sure that we are continuing to engage them in a discipleship process that helps them grow in their relationship with a community of faith. And so one of the things that you see here very quickly, going from boomers to Generation X to millennials to Gen Z, there's a lot more tolerance for more communication. So don't feel like it's too much to have to send a monthly email. It's too much to send text. Especially the younger generations here, there's a much higher tolerance for that constant communication. And in fact, they're looking for it because that's what they're getting from others. As they talk about other nonprofits, this is the kind of communication they expect to receive. So generosity as a symptom, meaning giving to the church, your generosity and how you feel about your connection to that church is based on the culture of that church, missional priorities that we talked about, the mission and vision, a discipleship pathway. What does that look like to be a disciple at your church? And what does that process look like where we help to encourage people to grow in that? Their generosity strategies, what things are we actually using and encouraging people to think about to be more generous? And then effective communication. We've got to make sure people know what their mission and vision is. We've got to know what those missional priorities are. We've got to continue to think about how we continue to message the importance of that discipleship path. Okay. Okay, so let me expand all of this. We're going to go through some pieces of this as Horizon Stewardship. We have found some very particular things, and this is where I want to give you some kind of concrete examples of some pieces that are very helpful in helping to grow generosity in a local church. It's keeping it spiritual, tell your ministry story, build relationships with givers, effective calls to action, measure effectiveness, and trust and accountability. So let's move into some of these. Okay. All right, let's start with first with keeping it spiritual. This is a famous quote. I'm not sure if you've heard of Lovett Weems, but within the Methodist system, he's somebody who, people kind of listen to as far as books and tapes and other seminars. He says two things here though. Never talk about people's money apart from their discipleship, and never talk about the church's money apart from its mission. So making sure that people understand when you're talking about money, you're talking about the church's mission. You're not talking about a budget. You're talking about what the church is trying to achieve over a period of time. And also never talk about people's money without talking about their discipleship process. Some of those examples of things to help keep it spiritual, focusing on discipleship, making sure that there is a clear path that people can understand. What does that mean at your church, in the culture and the context of your church? What does that mean to have an intentional discipleship path? Are your members focused on growing spiritually? And can the church assist in growing the faith in others? How can they, as leaders in your church, continue to help the church grow by encouraging others to be a part of that faith community? Telling your ministry story. So telling stories, this was really at the heart of Jesus's ministry. And I think, for most of us like me, I'm a fairly simple person, so I don't remember a lot of the details of Scripture, especially sometimes when you get to the Old Testament. But I remember Jesus's stories. Those you recall those much more often and much more clearly, and you remember the messages that you get out of that. So thinking about, how we tell stories and telling stories to give examples of how you can be generous can be very, very helpful. So again, telling stories of discipleship, impact in your life as you're talking about your local church, the leadership of your church, talking about what has happened in your heart as a part of that community of faith. Having others share their personal impact stories. And this may seem blasphemous. For the first 10 years of my life, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and we talked about it as testimony. But again, there is a definite role for that kind of having people talk about their stories of impact. That's what many people relate to. My wife and I see different. My wife and I work very well together, but we see things from different perspectives. In that, when we're looking to give to something, my wife wants to hear a personal story of impact. I want to see the stats. I want to see the information. I want to see that part of it. But my wife needs those personal stories. So knowing that those personal stories are there can be very, very helpful. Building and giver investment relationships. So thinking about, discipleship takes place in the context of relationships. How are we continuing to grow personal relationships with people in our community of faith? So it's some very kind of basic things. Do you know your top 10 givers personally? Do you know who they are? Have you taken them to dinner? Have you uh, met them for coffee? Have they come to your office and had conversations with you? And it doesn't have to be about giving. It's about their lives and building a closer connection again, and as being a leader in that body of faith. Do you visit with spiritual and potential leaders of the church? When I'm talking about spiritual leaders, I'm talking about deacons and elders. I'm talking about others that are leaders in the church. They're mainstays of those local churches. But also, are there some young people, some of those millennials, some of those Gen Zs who we can start talking to and having some of those conversations about being a future leader? The reason that I became and the reason that I served on a finance committee in the Presbyterian Church, Fountain City Presbyterian Church in Knoxville, and that again where my children were born, where I was married. The reason I served on that was because I was a 30-something-year-old with two small kids, busy life. But I had a mentor within that church that said, you know what? I want to take you to one of these meetings. I hope you'll go with me to a finance meeting. I think because of your background, you're going to have some skills and you could really help our community of faith. By doing that and mentoring me, he helped me through that process of saying, you know what? This is something I actually would like to serve in, and I would be a part of this. So again, thinking about connecting with those spiritual leaders and those potential leaders that you can have in the future as well. Also, do you hold church-wide meetings to hear from everyone? Do people have an opportunity either through a survey, through certain meetings on certain time periods to hear out and say, hey, tell me how you're feeling about things that are going on. Let's have an opportunity to hear from everyone. You want to there's going to be a necessary element of having, because you can't meet with everyone personally. That's just reality. We're all limited in the time that we have, but we can talk about who are those top 10 families that we need to make sure we keep a very close personal relationship with, the spiritual leaders and those up and coming leaders, but then also giving everybody an opportunity to be heard in the church as well. Making the ask. Couple of things here. Don't limit the generosity of others, and promoting online giving, promoting recurring giving, making sure those are all opportunities for people to give. And I would say, if nothing else, I would say just be intentional about asking people to give. We have a lot of resources, and I'll show you at the end of this presentation. We have the on our Horizons website, the 365 website has an AI portion, but also just a, type it in, what are you looking for kind of thing to say, hey, lots and lots of resources we put on there to help you walk through some of these pieces. But, again, making the ask is one of those things that is important for us to continue to remember that we gotta have some intentionality to how we do stewardship. Telling stories of grace, telling stories on a Sunday and offering time, doing personal meetings with key spiritual financial leaders, having specific giving cards. It surprises me as I visit some churches, they don't actually have a stewardship Sunday. They don't actually have a process of cards of an intentionality of doing a stewardship day or a stewardship Sunday. Those things are important and they do actually help. You want to make sure you're framing everything that you do within the culture of your church. But one of the things that I have found in my faith is as I have grown in faith, it's because sometimes I push into a level of discomfort. And so pushing the community of faith in a little bit into that community, in a little bit into that discomfort level of saying, you know what, we're going to try some different things. We want to engage people in generosity. We want to make sure people understand what they're giving to. We've got a 5-year plan that we put together with our missional priorities, with our mission and vision statement. We're going to publicize that and talk about it, but we're going to be intentional about asking as well, giving people opportunities to give in many different ways. So measuring effectiveness, we have some pretty sophisticated tools with Horizons that I would say, it's not for every church. It's not something that every church can afford. But I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here tonight. I'm gonna give you a process, a very quick process of a way to measure your effectiveness as a church that I think could be very helpful. And I've used this with dozens and dozens of churches and nonprofits. So very quickly, and I want to honor our time here, but I think this is an important part of a way that you can measure where your church is. So if you take your giving units top to bottom, we typically call this the house of God. There's a kitchen table area, there's a living room area, and a front porch area. So if you think about a house, the kitchen table tend to be those people that are most connected to you. The living room tend to be your regular givers. And your front porch tend to be people who are just getting to know you, just coming to the church or may not be giving at a very high level. So if you take your giving units top to bottom, top third, middle third, and bottom third. If you analyze those and say, okay, how much did our top third give? How much did a middle third give? How much did that bottom third give? If you talk about that kitchen table being that top third, the ones that are usually most connected to you, that's going to be about the healthiest churches. That top third tends to be about 75% of your total giving. That middle third tends to be about 20 for the healthiest churches. And the bottom section, those people in that front porch getting to know you, tends to be about 5. Now, how far away you are from that 75, 20, and 5 can tell you a lot about how healthy you are as a church. Now, does that mean you've met all your goals? Does that mean your budget's not in the red? No, not at all. What this is really showing, though, is how are you distributed? How is the distribution between the top of your givers and the bottom of your givers? And what does that look like? And how is the health of that looking like? So for instance, I worked with a church that was 92% in that top kitchen table level. Now that's not a real healthy area to be in. Now here's why. Let's say that you lose one or two families in that 92%. It typically takes at least 10 to 15 families to make up for that one family you've lost in that top third. So if you think about that middle third, which are the kitchen, which are the living room folks, you need 10 to 15 of those to make up for at least one of those in the kitchen table. So thinking about where you are in those, and here's the thing I would encourage you to think about doing. Look at 22 data, 2023, 24 and 25. Look and see if you can find a trend there. Are you doing closer to that 75, 20, and 5? Or are you moving farther away from that? And again, what I would tell you is if you have your mission objections out there, you've got a mission and vision, you're doing communication, you're doing some of these other things, you're going to be moving in the right direction. But again, knowing where you are is a big part of that. So I hope this is helpful to you. Maintaining trust and accountability. Again, making sure that people understand what you're doing, that you're communicating where the church is. One thing I would tell you, though, is that it's usually not healthy to have every member of the church receive the total budget line, top line with every single piece in it there for a couple of reasons. Number one, for many families, when they see that, their eyes kind of glaze over and they're like, "Oh, this is too much. I have no clue how to make this work or what this even means." The other thing is that they might start looking at pieces of that and saying, "You know what? We really don't need that position. We really don't need that part of the building. We don't need to have that ministry here, whatever." So again, thinking about your audience, your kitchen table, that top third, most of those want to see all that information. The folks in your middle section that are regular givers, they tend to be people who want to know and say, yeah, we're doing okay as a church, but they also might be helpful. It might be helpful to them if they see a narrative budget that's put out in a different way in graphs to say, if you've ever seen a narrative budget, we can send you obviously examples of that. But a narrative budget, instead of having all the lines in it, what it really does is talks about service areas and generosity areas. What are we doing in missions? What are we doing in this area? And it helps break it out in a different way that people can grasp and say, oh, okay, I really didn't know that as we talk about the staff, it might be a high percentage of the total budget, but it does all this stuff. I mean, it's related to all of these things in the church, and it's hard to see that unless you break it out in a different way. So again, your living room and your front porch need to see that information in a different kind of context. Okay, and again, here's some resources. I would really encourage you to think about going to giving365.com. I think that would be really helpful to you. Lots of great resources. They're all free. And you'll by going there, if you would like to, we'd love to get you on our regular newsletter, send you regular updates, and send you a lot of great information from Horizon Stewardship as we go forward. And again, we've got a good AI function now. You just type in, "Hey, I want stewardship resources," and it'll catalog and find it all for you. So it's kind of a really cool resource there. Um, one piece that I did want to say, and I hope I can beg Steve's forgiveness later if I need to, but as a senior VP for Horizons, I would be remiss if I didn't say that in your churches and others that we provide services that can help you walk through some of the things that we talked about tonight. We can do that through coaching services. We can do that through what we call next level generation. I'm sorry, next level generosity. Next level generosity is this circle that you see here, the keeping it spiritual, tell your story, building relationships, effective calls, and measuring. It's walking a church through that process in your context and helping you see that. And of course, we do capital campaigns as well. So just want to throw that out there. If you know of someone who needs services, if you'd like to have a contact and have just an initial call, I would love to have that conversation with you. Would love to share this knowledge. You can see I have some enthusiasm for it because I love what I get to do. And every day is a lot of fun when you get to do fun things. So I enjoy this work. I love getting to serve God and really appreciate the opportunity, Steve, to be with you tonight and to be with each of you. I think we're right at our time here for questioning, though.
Yeah, you did. You finished that right on the dot. I appreciate that. If you could jump off the screen share, Rhodes, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for all of that. That's a lot of information, and it's a good thing that we recorded this because it's going to take a second viewing to take that all in. But I just want to highlight a couple things before we open up for some questions. I love the way that Rhodes started talking about mission and missional priorities and having clarity in that. It is so important because the days of people giving to their churches just because that's what you're supposed to do are kind of gone, right? Having a clarity about who you are, what you're about, where you're headed is so key, especially when it comes to millennials. And, one of the things that the Giving USA study and Rhodes cited this, a 57% increase in giving from millennials. And we tend to think that they are not giving. But again, they're giving, they're just not giving to the church. They are giving to organizations that have clarity about who they are, what they're about, and that are very, very good at saying, because of the money you're giving, here's the impact that's happening. And we in the church are not always great about that, right? So that comes back to that telling the story. The other thing that I think is really important to highlight is, Rose talked about pastors having knowledge of the giving amounts of their members. And that is something that in the Presbyterian church that I've grown up in all my life, and the churches I've served, has been a little bit taboo. Um, and I'm working on a church up the road in Salisbury on a capital campaign, and the pastors don't know that information. And another campaign I'm working with, the same thing. And so there's some education I think that we need to do about why churches should allow their pastor to know that. And there's no other nonprofit where the CEO doesn't know the top 10 givers, right? And obviously you want pastors to not abuse that, and that's a whole other issue. But it puts the pastor in the best position possible to steward their church in this work. So I just wanted to highlight those two things. I would love for those of you on the Zoom to ask any questions you have of Rhodes right now. What kind of questions do you have?
Rhodes,
Or
I'm
comments?
Rhodes, I'm interested in your thoughts about smaller churches. Uh,
Mhm.
the We have churches in our area that will have 10, 15 people in a worship service, and they often are struggling to raise enough money to support a pastor, even a part-time pastor. Um, how do you how do you take some of these ideas and gear them towards those smaller churches that just have a smaller handful of people? And a lot of
Mhm.
them are older.
Did we lose Steve there?
He's stuck.
He's stuck.
Mhm.
You have one, but maybe the other.
Um,
I think
and
there he
Oh,
in
there
the
we
is.
small
go.
churches, a
There
lot
we
of
go.
times I've
Steve,
also
sorry about
noticed
that. We lost
they,
the last half of
oh,
your question there about small churches.
yeah, just what do you suggest for them in terms of stewardship? Most of them don't have stewardship programs. They never
Mhm.
have. They never need money. Money just is there. The boiler goes out. They Somebody talks to somebody, and the money somehow gets there until it doesn't. And
Correct.
so how do you help the churches to deal with those kind of issues in a smaller context?
Well, I would say a couple of things. Number one, the missional priorities and the mission and vision are perfect for any church, no matter the size, no matter the level. You need to know who you are and where you want to go. As a small church, I have seen churches in the Tennessee conference in the United Methodist Church that had 25 members and grew to 200 in a pretty short period of time. Now, what they did is they made an intentional focus to say, we're not going to be the church that we were over the last 10 years. We want to intentionally go out and help people in this community. And by doing that, when they started going outside the walls of the church, people started noticing that. And where their growth came was in those millennials, those 40s and 30-year-olds who would never have darkened the doors of that church before. Because, and this sounds very harsh, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, for many millennials, if they see many traditional services as a historical reenactment, meaning this is the same kind of service that it looked like 25 to 50
No.
years ago, it looked just like this. So they're kind of like, oh, we've kind of done this before. But if you think about where their connections are to Sunday school classes and to mission projects. And if those local churches can start, even if it's two or three people, having intentional Sunday school, having intentional classes, even if it's not on a Sunday, do it when you think you can get people together. Again, that's about growth, but about connection and giving, having that mission statement, having that, it might take some time to get there. But if you intentionally set your goals, the two church examples I gave, one was internally focused, the other was externally focused. I would say the smaller the church, the more externally focused you really need to be.
And yet, the more pressure there is to become just a small group of people that looks to each
Yes.
other and
That inertia tends to pull you in that way.
yeah.
Yes, it does. But what will help you grow and help you grow in giving and help you grow in a community of faith is actually going the other way, focusing out.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Good question, Steve. Thanks. Other
I guess I
questions?
can, let me jump in. Hey, I'm David Bender, pastor in the here. And that good looking man down there who was not talk is my friend Osmond Sim. He is chair of our communications team, which includes stewardship. So go, Osmond, go.
That's great.
And also want to talk to the camera just a bit to recommend Horizons as well. We have done 4 capital campaigns since 2015 for 2 parts of the building. 2 of those we did with Horizons help. 2 of them we did on our own, borrowing a lot from Horizon, shall we say, and worked well with them, and they do a good job. Give these guys a call, these people a
Well, thank
call.
you for the endorsement.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome. I was just listening and about to the breakdown of who's giving more and who's giving less, and the Gen Zs are the 20 and 30s. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I've got 2 Gen Zs. I got twins who are both
Mhm.
22 in the Gen Z range, and I don't know how they pay anything to anybody. Um,
Yes.
Economy as it is, housing prices as it is, they're going to be. Maybe it's going to be a generations before them as well, but that generation is going to redefine what to do with money and how to live with money. If I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I'll
But
tell you, Dave, my kids are 26 and 27,
yeah,
and my daughter, who's the teacher, is 27 here in Beaufort County. That's the big struggle for her. She wants to buy a house, but getting that 20% down, getting the kind of cost of housing that you have these days, things are changing. So as you look at those levels of where people are in their giving, um, you know, it's really going to be important for us to say whatever you can give today is great. If you're the people on that front porch that I talked about that are just starting up, give something. If you're in that living room, consider giving a little bit more to help us reach to the outside. If you're in that phase where you in your life phase, and I'll tell you, my wife and I are both 55. We're just to that age where we're starting to be in that other bracket there, and we know that we have a leadership position because we've been in that living room. We've been on that front porch. And there's a responsibility that you hope people will see as leaders and say, hey, we need to help out these younger people, have them give something, have them start giving, but let's help them along the way here because yeah, you're exactly right. They are going to continue to struggle for a period of time, and we hope things change. We that's what part of our faith is, but yeah, think things are a little crazy right now.
yeah. And I don't necessarily see our numbers as to who the top givers are.
Hmm.
Only get an idea of that every time we do a Horizons capital campaign because y'all get them all together. So if the pastor has that information, what's the pastor supposed to do with that information?
So, what I would tell you is having intentional conversations, meaning that you're not going out and saying, "Hey, we need you to give X amount." It's about just developing personal relationships. Because here's the thing: the people that are sitting around that kitchen table, that top third that I talked about, they see the church and they're connected to a church in a different way than the way people are in the living room and on the front porch. They want to have that personal connection with you as a pastor. They want to have that one-on-one time with you, and it's important to them to have that. As they work with other nonprofits, they have the dean of the college coming to see them. They have the CEO of the women's shelter who comes and sits in their living room. They expect that. And so that's just part of that relationship. But again, we get to see people on a weekly basis. We have an advantage over all those other nonprofits in that we have spent years building close relationships with people. It's personalizing that in a way that helps you build and see themselves as leaders in that faith community. That's what you're really trying to build.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. Good
The
questions.
giving will come as a consequence of doing those other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a we have session meetings. We have one this past Monday, and Mr. Osmond gave kind of a preview of what we're thinking this year. And one of our elders was reading a book or had read a book and suggested stewardship as a spiritual practice. Um, Is that language at all within y'all's what y'all do, or
That sounds like a Horizons book, David.
oh yeah,
I'm wondering what book it
Absolutely.
is.
I'll find out and tell you,
I'm
but
wondering if it was like Not Your Parents' Offering Plate. That's a pretty popular book that was written by the guy that founded Horizons. So,
yeah,
um,
we did use the first one. We were New Church Development in 2013. I don't know why I didn't do a stewardship campaign for the very beginning, but we didn't, and we were way below and having a whole lot of trouble because the money that was being given from the presbytery had ended, and had our first stewardship campaign, and we read that book.
yeah.
Our stewardship leader read that book, and we went to a little program at the presbytery office, and that made all the difference. So yeah.
I don't want to. I cut Rhodes off answering your question. So Rhodes, I'll let you sort of answer that. Giving stewardship as
Steve,
a
you
spiritual
did.
discipline.
Absolutely, and you did a great job, I think, in answering that because it absolutely keeping it spiritual is the first of that circle that we talk
Yeah.
about because it's the most important in setting the tone that we are a community of faith together. The other pieces help us assist that, but we call our stewardship program that we help others it's called Next Level Generosity. And generosity is a term that's different than just giving. Generosity is about spirituality and being a part of your discipleship walk, that giving is a piece of that. You're a disciple as a community of faith and you're a disciple as an individual, but doing that collectively is something that's just really, really important and helpful. But again, that spiritual aspect has got to be a part. And it's what separates us from the women's shelters and separates us from a lot of the universities and the others, in that we have that context that we do service for God, and we're doing this collectively together to be the hands and feet in the world.
Yeah.
Amen to that.
Friends, I want to be sensitive to our time, your time, and so if there are no other super pressing questions, raise your hand right now. Forever hold your peace. Rhodes, we are so grateful. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Osmond. Did you have something you wanted to say? No, you were on mute, my friend.
Unmute, Osmond, unmute.
That's right. Yeah.
There you go.
So Pastor David is my pastor at Faith, and I'm the communications elder with responsibility to lead the stewardship campaign. So I'd like to follow up on the section where you talked about make the ask
Mm-hmm.
and challenge folks about the ask. So our church is primarily boomers. We're in the age group, 75, 80. And typically we have a theme, we have a Bible verse and catchphrases and so on. And that's how we make our ask. But then when you said challenge folks, I didn't get the full understanding of how to challenge like the boomers, for example.
So there's a couple of contexts to that. Number one is we want them to see them all of us together as a community of faith, and as part of that, we want to grow in what we are doing together. Having those missional priorities and having a mission vision statement allows us to say, "Hey, here's the direction we're going in, and we're challenging you to help us be a part of this." We want to move toward these goals. And to do that, we need you to invest with us. We're all going to do it together, but we need you to continue to think about investing more that helps us reach these goals we've set for ourselves. So, you're on the right path with some of those pieces. What I would say is building in personal statements from people, those stories of impact that we talked about, build those into that process, but also having a 5-year plan to say, this is where this church is heading and where we're going is going to be extremely helpful, because then you can make the challenge to them to say, hey, we need your help as leaders. We use, I think it's First Chronicles 29, Steve, that we use when we talk about David, when he asked the leaders of the community to say, who will help God build the temple? And the leaders of the community stepped up first and they said, we know that we need to be the first to set the tone for everybody else. And the people all gave charitably, they all gave sacrificially because they saw the leaders of the community doing that. And so, when they see the leaders, those spiritual and financial leaders of the church, just because someone is not the top giver in the church, it doesn't mean they don't have a lot of sway in the church. There's always a Mrs. Jones. There's always that one person who everybody looks to in the church. She or he may not be the top giver, but there's somebody of a lot of influence in the church because they know everything that they say is about the church. So having those people give testimony and say, hey, we're headed in the right direction, we're moving toward these 5-year goals, that's one of those things I think you can really use to challenge people and say, help us achieve this together.
It's not necessarily asking for money. It's challenging those top 10 givers, as you say.
Well, the money comes as part of it, but it is important for people to understand we need their time and we need their talents. But without the treasure, without the generosity, and without that part of it, it's like a three-legged stool trying to stand on two legs. It doesn't work. So we have to have those. We have to have people to think about. If you're on the front porch and just starting to give, we need you to give something. If you're in that living room, consider giving a little bit more. If you're one of those leaders, we hope you will continue to give more and be more generous because you have to lead the way for everybody else. But again, it's those kinds of messages that can help us think about we're all in this together and we're a community of faith leading toward those goals. But setting those goals out there will be very, very helpful in people saying, the university sets goals for a reason. They have capital campaigns. When they do annual stewardship campaigns, they say, and again, I worked for a university for 10 years. They have call-a-thons, they have other things that they do, but it's always set on, we're gonna be able to bring 25 more people for economically disadvantaged kids into this school because of the gifts you're giving. There is always a way for them to say, we're setting these goals to get there. And churches need to do the same thing to say, in ministry, we want to set these goals and we need your help to get there.
Thank you.
And Osmond, to Rhodes' point, I'll just offer this one thing and then we'll close out. One of the ways that you can institutionalize that in the life of the church beyond just the stewardship season, and Rhodes mentioned this briefly in his presentation, were offering talks. Mm-hmm. So the last year or two that I was at Trinity Presbyterian here in Charlotte, the associate pastor and I started doing an invitation of sorts for the offering that was more than just what I had done for God knows how many years, which is, and now it's time for the offering, and plates are going around, which is so not exciting. But what we started doing was we got up and told a 2-minute anecdote of something that we had seen that past week, an impact that the church had made, or somebody's life that was impacted because of something that happened with the church, and then finished it by saying, and friends, it's because thanks to your generosity, this person was able to experience this. And we started it, and it was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to think of things once a week. My gosh. But when you get in the habit of that, I actually had to keep a running note on my phone every time I saw something because I started seeing more things, right? And I had people in my congregation that said that was their favorite part of the service. Which, in one sense, I didn't know how to take that because I'd preached the sermon that same service. So I was like, okay, yeah, right. But and the other thing, I was like, that is so awesome because that's what people want to hear and see is that their church is making an impact. They're proud in their church for that, and then that just leans into wanting to support and continue the good work. So I just offered that as a low-hanging fruit that I think you've got to do it in church. You got to invite people. So why not expand it a little bit and do that? Friends, thank you so much. Rhodes, thank you again. We're going to put your contact information on the Ministry Toolbox website, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So that if anybody wants to reach out to you and connect with you after this, that would be great. Friends, our next Ministry Toolbox in April, I think it's the 16th, but don't hold that date to me because I'm working off short-term memory, is youth ministry in smaller congregations. How in the heck does that work? So we've got a couple of practitioners that do youth ministry that are going to come and talk about that. We're excited about that. But again, Rhodes, thanks so much for being with us. To those of you on the Zoom or watching, blessings to you, and we will see you next time.